Okay, hey guys, Mr. Pokke here again, back with another video. So this time we'll also be diving into an in-depth look on Lightcones in particular. I've received some pretty positive feedback, so thank you guys for enjoying my previous content regarding how you should progress your Trailblazer levels from 1 to 60. So this time I'm hope to bring some clarity to the table with regards to what sort of Lightcones you exchange from all the shops, mainly the Forgotten Hall, the Herta's Lightcone, as well as the paid battle pass if you guys have bought it. So to help me illustrate my points clearer and just I guess to make this video more concise, this is an Excel sheet that I've done. And I think it really helps to help us make a better comparison, because one thing that you should always note when choosing what Litecoin to have is you need to look at what other Litecoins are available to you across all the different sources. Even if you don't have access to the gacha Litecoins, assuming you're someone that don't do any pools, but these Litecoins should still be a factor of consideration, especially when you consider that eventually at the end of the day you will pull a gacha pool. So one day when you do get another Litecoin that can maybe perhaps replace your previous Litecoins, then you should consider whether you should really invest your entire bank on the current Litecoin you have, considering that there are better replacements out there, right? So yeah, what you get from the gacha pool should affect your decision, even if you don't have the Litecoin for that particular piece right now. So that's the first things first, right? And before we dive into which Litecoin you should exchange from the three shops, right? These three shops mainly, I want to just talk about a little bit of general notes, just like how I did again for the Trailblazer level comparison, right? So number one, there will be no SSR Litecoins used for comparison. This is with exception to Herta Shop, because technically they're all SSR. What I mean by SSR Litecoins is the SSR Litecoins that you get from the game, which is from the gacha pool, right? So I'm particularly talking about these Litecoins in particular, right? So we won't be talking about any of these 5-star Litecoins, because technically at max level, max superimposition, it's really hard for you to try to beat any of them. And realistically speaking, you can't really get their superimposition level 5 anytime soon, especially for free to play. Even for spending players, I think it's going to take quite a while to get them to rank 5. So we won't be comparing these with our analysis at all. Alright, so that's number one. Number two, all Litecoins here used for our comparison here, they will all be assumed to be at superimposition level 5. And why are we doing this? Because I want you guys to have the mentality that if you want to exchange more of the Litecoins here, you want to exchange only that particular piece of Litecoins to max it. So what's my rationale behind this? It is way better for players to get a single copy to superimposition level 5 rather than just get one copy, because at the end of the day, right, as long as you play the game and you pull from the gacha light pool, you will get dupes of the Litecoin eventually. And when you were to get one copy of these each from the free shop, it's only a matter of time before you get more and more dupes of the gacha Litecoins, and they will definitely overpower your base Litecoins at superimposition level 1 if you get them for free. So my advice is strongly to recommend you guys to exchange a single specific Litecoin, get set on it, and just keep focusing on it until you eventually max it out, and then move on to the next Litecoin. So that's number two. And finally, lastly, the stats provided by the Litecoins will not be our key focus today, such as comparing level 1 stats to level 60 stats, and we'll be only looking at the effects of the Litecoin, because we're taking this assumption that we're playing this game for the end game, right? We don't want to play this game for 1 week or 1 month. If you're that kind of player, then honestly, whatever Litecoin you choose doesn't really matter, because the game's lifespan is really short for you. But if you're playing this game for the long run and you want to min-max and everything, we'll just be assuming that every single Litecoin that you get, we are eventually going to bring them to their highest capabilities, which is i.e. their levels. So all of them will be, we won't really compare the stats that are provided by them. We'll be comparing solely based on the abilities and the effects in the Litecoin, because that's something that you can't really change that much, and it's what determines the value of the Litecoin itself. So with general notes out of the way, let's just get started first on Forgotten Hall. Zoom in this real quick, right? So these are the Litecoins that you get. There are 7 different classes, 1 from each class, and in my opinion, the 3 Litecoins that stands out to me as a player is Quid Pro Quo, Wolf Walk Time, as well as Seriousness of Breakfast. But first thing first, why I want to say I put a little asterisk on the Wolf Walk Time here. So personally for me, I am a hook player. I have a hook and E4 because I've put for Silly. And Wolf Walk Time is without a doubt the best Litecoin for hook, even better than the Clara's 5-star Litecoin, Signature Litecoin, or 4 of Aeon, or all that kind of stuff, because of how Wolf Walk Time synergizes with any unit that triggers bleed or burn with a very high uptime. And hook is somebody that triggers burn almost 100% of the time, especially when considered that her burn lasts 2 turns. So Wolf Walk Time is definitely without a doubt something that you will get if you have hook and you want to build hook. And honestly, my advice is get this because Hook right now is the strongest fire DPS, even stronger than Himiko when it comes to boss damage. No other fire DPS units even come close to Hook right now. So especially even at E0, right, Hook is doing way more in terms of fire than any other fire units right now. So personally for me, you should raise Hook, and if you raise Hook, right, you will want to get Wolf for time, right? So, but let's just say that you are somebody that don't want to raise Hook at all. You don't want to play her because you don't like her design, or you just think that there's going to be a better fire unit sometime in the future, or you just like simply not interested in her at all, then Wolf for time is definitely something that you should not consider. You don't need to consider Wolf for time at all if you're not going to play Hook, right? So, but if you're someone that's going to play Hook, and honestly, I strongly recommend you guys try Hook out. Just try her out, and you'll just see how strong she is when it comes to enemies that are weak to the fire element, right? So, with that out of the way, Quid Pro Quo and the seriousness of breakfast. Let's just take a look at what they do exactly, right? For Quid Pro Quo, this is a very interesting Lightcone in a sense where, okay, we're going to compare this at max value, right? It's very interesting because this is the only abundance Lightcone currently that gives your healer more utility in forms of energy. So in a sense, you can say that this is an offensive Lightcone for healers, and this is the only one in the current pool of abundance Lightcones at the moment. All other abundance Lightcones, if you take a look, Pulse of Conversation, Perfect Timing, even the 5-star one, the time waits for no one, all their main focus is on generating defensive capabilities for your team. They are meant to increase the heal, they are meant to make your healer tankier, or some kind of just overall increasing your survivability. But Quid Pro Quo is the only abundance Lightcone that allows you to give energy to your teammates if you are in a situation where you realize you don't really need heals that much. So what am I talking about? Especially considering if you want to do like simulated universe or those content in the story where you realize that sometimes your healers you don't really need your healers to heal. Like your team is relatively healthy even when you have your, for example, if you need Natasha, right? Even though your team is like maybe shave off at 10-20%, you don't even want to use your Natashas out because they're just not that low. And in these situations, right, having Quid Pro Quo would greatly help the DPS of a team just because it regenerates up to 16 energy. And in case you all don't know, most units right now we have in the game ranges between 110, 120, 130 energy. The highest right now I believe is Qingque at 140 energy. So 16 energy is more than 10% of any unit's outbar. And this is going to be huge because it happens at every single time it's your healer's turn. So as you progress throughout the game, as you get better gear, get better speed substats or main stats, your healer's turn is going to come more and more frequently. And the more and more frequent your healer's turn gets, the more energy it's going to give to a randomly chosen ally. And take a look at it, only applies to energy lower than 50%, right? Now this might seem like a limitation at first, but I can safely tell you that for most cases, I would say more than 80% of the time, you will rarely run into a spot where all of your other 3 units have a synchronized energy of higher than 50%. Because usually there's different speeds, there's different times we want to use your out, and there's different charge rates for your out. So more or less, you're always going to find a teammate with an energy bar of lower than 50%. And that's why I would say that this uptime for the 16 energy is relatively high and it's only bound by how fast your healer is. So with that being said, I think just because this icon is the only one that's providing this offensive capability of generating energy, this is definitely a consideration if you want to exchange for an abundance icon in the Forgotten Hall. Another Lightcone that I would recommend is over here. Other than Wolf of Time, which I've already explained earlier on, is the seriousness of breakfast. So if you take a look at the comparison for seriousness of breakfast, right? You have the Birth of Self, Make the World Clamor, as well as Genius's Response when it comes to the comparison. You always want to compare your Lightcone and see what that. Also, if you take a look at the effect of Birth of Self first, this effect is only limited to your follow-up attacks. And the secondary part is only limited to current HP below or equal to 50%. Now, this will automatically restrict a lot of units when it comes to Erudition class to, if you don't have any follow-up attacks, you basically cannot use the effect of this at all. So it's really, really limited. And the second line, right, it's only dealt to enemies below 50% HP. So if you were in a situation where you're like one-shotting enemies from 100% to 0%, the second effect will not trigger at all. So you will only have up to 58% to your follow-up attack. The secondary line will not be considered at all if you were to 100 to 0 an enemy unit. So that's number 1. Number 2, Make the World Clamor. This actually, even though this says it's a gachapu Lightcone, but if you pre-registered for the event, and I think it's still ongoing right now, you can actually get this from this Star Rail login event where you check in and you try to do like some warp-in event kind of stuff, and this is given to you for free. Alright, so if you take a look at the effect, it immediately regenerates 32 energy and increase your ultimate damage by 64%. The first line I would say is not that significant because 32% energy is roughly, I would say, 25%, 30% of your entire energy bar for most units, and for long fights, especially for like very multiple phases fights where we take more than like 10 turns, 15 turns, this kind of stuff, then this Lightcone wouldn't really see that much value for the first line. But the second line is absolutely massive. 64% ultimate damage is absolutely huge. And considering that most erudition units, right, their strength lies on their AoE clear, and a lot of them do a very, very big damage on their out. So this 64 damage out multiplier is actually pretty solid, right? So it's a Lightcone to consider. Then we go into Seriousness of Breakfast. Now, Seriousness of Breakfast at max rank increases your damage by 24%, as well as for every defeated enemy increases up to another 24% of your attack. So this Lightcone, I believe, is better than the other two that I've mentioned because that the wearer's damage uptime is applied to all of your skills. It's applied to your basic attack, it's applied to your skill, it's applied to like any of your traits, your passives, and your ultimate, right? So this 24% just might have more value because when you want to consider ultimate, right? Ultimate, even though the multiplier was pretty big, 64% for Make the World Clamor, but you really only use your ultimate like at most every 3 or 4 turns. So really the uptime for that 64% you should divide it by 3 or 4. Whereas for this Lightcone, if you use your skill, your ultimate, whatever, it always gives you this 24% damage buff. And that's pretty huge, right? And that's a lot of damage, right? But for every defeated enemy, this goes up even more. And since it gives you an attack buff. Now, even though we know by now that attack buff is not that valuable, but if you're gonna give you this attack buff for free, why not just take it, right? So, and most of the time when you want to face enemies with mobs and even boss units, they also summon their own mobs. You're probably gonna be able to stack up this 24% relatively easily. So that's why I say Seriousness of Breakfast is honestly a pretty good erudition Lightcone for free-to-play standards, right? So that concludes my recommendation on which Lightcone you should get from the Forgotten Hall shop. Now, why would I not recommend you to get any of these 4 Lightcones, especially River Flows in Spring, right? Is because I just believe that in terms of comparison against the other Lightcones that you have, especially if you take a look here in the gacha, they just have a lot more better options in comparison, right? So, Fermata. Okay, generally, I just want to say for Nihility class in general, right? I don't think Nihility is in the best spot right now. Not saying that they are completely unplayable. I'm not saying that Sampo is trash. If you're on Sampo main, please don't kill me. But just compared, like we have to be realistic here. Like just compared to meta teams where you're running like one hyper carry such as Sile or Dan Heng or like Shu Sheng with a tank and a healer and a support. Just compared to these teams, Nihilities just aren't in a very good spot, especially because they're lacking a lot of their crucial units such as Silver Wolf and Kafka and all that kind of stuff. So right now, I just wouldn't focus on Nihility Lightcones in general. Nothing against Fermata, but just in general, Nihility Lightcones are not in a good spot. So maybe in the mid game or in the late game where we get like patch 1.2 and 1.3, we will get better and better Nihility support classes, such as all the units that I mentioned previously. Then maybe we can start looking into Nihility Lightcone. And by then, that will be probably like what, 5-6 months, and you'll definitely have more than enough currency to redeem a good Nihility Lightcone such as the one in Forgotten Hall. It's honestly not bad, but just because that they're not in a very good spot, I just wouldn't recommend getting this at the current phase of the game. So just Nihility class, let's just highlight this. Yeah. I mean, nothing personal, but just something that I wouldn't get at the moment, right? So, okay, Preservation Lightcone. We are Wildfire. Okay, this Lightcone, it's very interesting in the sense where like it front loads all the benefits into like the first 5 turns. After 5 turns, which is this 16% damage decrease as well as healing your units, it essentially is an empty Lightcone. You gain nothing out of this Lightcone other than the stats provided, and that's gonna be a big issue for more challenging contents against like tougher bosses, especially when it comes to Memory of Chaos, which is the endgame content of the game, right? You basically lose out this entire chunk. It doesn't apply to you anymore. And if you compare it to other preservation Lightcones, there's just a lot more better options that you can have, such as Day 1 of My Life. It's a fantastic Lightcone, honestly. Increase your damage rest for the entirety of the fight, as well as the rarest defense. And in case you all don't know by now, defense is a super important step for our current class of preservation units, such as Fire MC and Japat, and their skills all scale off of defense. So having any sort of preservation Lightcones that allows you to increase your defense, right, is an automatic win, in my opinion, right? So this is also applied to the trend of the universal market, increases your defense, and there's a 100% base chance to burn the enemy. Although this burn might not seem like much since it's just a burn, but it actually scales off of your defense. So this is perfect for any sort of like fire preservation units such as Fire MC, where you're gonna stack a ton of defense, and then you're gonna burn the enemy if they get hit. And this enables you to make some crazy mono fire comps which like scales of burn, right, such as Hook. So this is also another excellent Lightcone to have. And another one, you look at Landau's Choice. the wearer is more likely to get attacked, but the damage taken is reduced by 60%. Even though it doesn't have any sort of defense scaling, but this innate taunt value increase is already valued by itself, which basically prevents your other carries, reduces the chance of them getting hit. And as you all know, most of the time, by now, if you all have played the game long enough, the reason for your run not successfully being able to clear the boss is not because your tank dies. It's more often than not because your support or your DPS got hit by a stray, like a stray ultimate charge or whatever thing, and then they get yeeted out of existence. But 99% of the time, I would say your tank is never the first one to die. And that's why having this taunt value to take the pressure off of your carries and your support is huge, even though it doesn't really scale off of any defense. And the damage taken is just another like bonus, right? At the max level 24%. Huge. Right. So that is why generally I wouldn't recommend getting We Are Wildfire, just because that there are so many other better preservation Lightcone. I didn't even talk about Moment of Victory, which is the 5-star one. There are just so many other 4-star ones, and you can get any one of them from the gacha pool or whatever, then you have really won. So we're not gonna get this. Right. River Flows in Spring, I don't think I need to say that much, but River Flows in Spring is more or less connected to our next point, which is the Herta Shop Lightcone. Right. I'll go into this a little bit more later on, so I just won't touch it. But TLDR, you shouldn't get River Flows in Spring. Then lastly, we have the Harmony Past and Future. Now, Past and Future, honestly, is a pretty decent Lightcone. If you take a look at the effect here, when the wearer uses a skill, the next ally at max level increases damage up by 32%. Now, this is absolutely massive, especially when you pair it up with Bronya, because every single time Bronya uses a skill, and this effect only triggers with a skill, right? It's automatically going to be your carry, because there's very little situations in the game where like you actually use Bronya's skill on like a tank or a support, unless you are in those dire moments where you desperately need your tank to like taunt the enemy, or you desperately need your Natasha to like heal your team or whatever. Then you'll use this skill. But other than that, 99% of the time when you're using your Bronya skill, this is going to be applied to your hyper carry, and 32% damage buff is honestly absolutely massive, especially when you consider that you're going to scale off of their ultimate multiplier, your base damage, your quantum damage, all that kind of good stuff. So this Lightcone is excellent Lightcone from Bronya. But my issue with this Lightcone is, number one, it's a direct inferior downgrade to Bronya's Lightcone. And even though I mentioned at the start of the video that we're not going to compare any 5-star Lightcones, but Bronya's Lightcone is just the best of the best at what it does right now. And if there's one Lightcone that I'll exchange from the shop, which is the Ember shop, that you can exchange any SSR rarity Lightcones, I would just highly recommend you guys get the Bronya Lightcone, just because of how much utility and value it brings. Just look at this bad boy. Just look at this. Increases energy regeneration rate, increases the skill point, and all this, after all that, you can increase the damage taken, right? And this is not even at the max value. So even though I said don't mention 5-star, but just because this Bronya Lightcone is just such a huge upgrade compared to Past and Future, that I would just consider not getting this in the long run. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to compare this in the long run, right? And the very, very first 5-star Lightcone that you should exchange from the shop should be Bronya's Lightcone. And because of that, the usefulness lifespan of this Past and Future is not that high if you were to exchange Bronya's Lightcone as a first Lightcone. Right? That's the first reason. Second reason, this Lightcone might not be working very well with other supports, because at the end of the game, Bronya shouldn't be your only support, right? Like, especially if you have Ting Yun or you have Asta, all these kind of very good harmony characters. It's very tricky to use this Lightcone with them, because you cannot guarantee that the next unit coming after them is going to be your carry, right? They might be your tank, they might be your healer, especially if you didn't speak to your team properly, right? So having this Lightcone on them essentially will become worthless if the turn after the wearer is not going to be your carry. So other than Bronya, this Lightcone is just not in a very good spot, because it's very hard to fit in with the team. And because of Bronya's Lightcone, I think this Lightcone will just get outclassed very, very easily when you consider that Bronya's Lightcone should be the first Lightcone that you exchange from the Ember shop, right? So that concludes our statement for Forgotten Hall. Let me just highlight this real quick to make it pretty clear. So bottom line, Wolf Walk time you should only get when you were to... Sorry, if you should only get Wolf Walk time if you are maining hook, but if you don't main hook, then you can ignore this and choose either Quid Pro Quo or Seriousness of Breakfast. Right, so that's number one. Okay, so that is for Forgotten Hall. Now we'll be going into Herta Shop. Right, there's only 3 Lightcones you get. They're all 5-star. Texture of Memories, Cruising the Stellar Sea, and On the Fall of an Aeon, which is their Preservation, Hunt, and Destruction path respectively. Now, these choices between the 3, I think it has been covered by so many content creators by now that I don't really think I need to cover that much, but I'll just keep it really, really short. TLDR, Texture of Memories is just the one Lightcone that you should never exchange from the shop, because it is just so utterly bad, and I'll show you guys why it's so utterly bad in a second. So the only 2 Lightcones you should consider is either Cruising the Stellar Sea or the 4 of the Aeon. And in my personal opinion, you should be getting Cruising the Stellar Sea more than the 4 of Aeon. And my rationale is very simple. There is just simply more hunt units than there are destruction units in the game. And there are more hunt units that can utilize Cruising the Stellar Sea more than the 4 of Aeon in the game. So what do I mean by this? Right. If you take a look at our current roster in our characters, the only destruction units that we have are Hook, Clara, and Arlen. Right. Arlen, he used to be excellent when he was in CBD3, but he got nerfed to God knows where, and he's basically like a shadow of his former self. So we probably don't really talk much about Arlen. So the only two good destruction units that we have is Clara and Hook. And like what I mentioned just now, Hook's best Lightcone is not 4 of Aeon. It is your Wolfwalk time, which you get from the Forgotten Hall. So if you are already going to Bane Hook and you are going to exchange Wolfwalk time from Forgotten Hall, then there's absolutely no reason for you to exchange on the 4 of Aeon, unless you have Clara, you're fixed on maining Clara for a very long time, and you don't have Clara's Lightcone, right? So really, you're exchanging this one Lightcone, this one on the 4 of Aeon. This is the only Lightcone, and can only be used on one unit really, which is Clara, right? So this is actually going to be used for one unit, and in my opinion, that is just not very it doesn't give you that much return on investments, especially when you want to just raise up a Lightcone for one unit in particular. Whereas Cruising the Stellar Sea, if you take a look at our hunt roster right now, we have 4 excellent hunt units, and none of them are like nerfed to hell like Arlen, and all of them are perfectly viable in their field, right? And Cruising the Stellar Sea honestly works with any of these units, right? Sile, Danheng, Shusheng, Yanqing, you name it. Cruising the Stellar Sea just works again, especially if you didn't pull for Sile's Lightcone, right? Now we know Sile's Lightcone is actually Rogan, but like I said, we're not going to mention that at all. And because Sile's Lightcone is limited, right, you can't really get her out anymore after this. So you shouldn't really think about Sile's Lightcone, especially if you're not going to get her. So that's why I want to say, back to the option of why Cruising the Stellar Sea can essentially be used on any of the 4 hunt units, and you're essentially getting this one Lightcone for 4 units instead of 1 unit, which is Clara. So 1 versus 4, you will realize that this Lightcone is just going to see a lot more use in the long run, especially if you don't have Clara. And even if you have Clara, you can only use your one character. So just because this Lightcone is more flexible, can fit on so many units, this is why I would highly advise you guys to get Cruising the Stellar Sea, right? But I just want to make it clear that all of these Lightcones, not just Herta anyways, all of the Herta Lightcone and Forgotten Hall and BP Lightcones, they're not meant to be a better version of like the 4-star Lightcones or like the 5-star Lightcones. Because first of all, they're not. Even at maximum rank, like rank 5 of Cruising the Stellar Sea, this is not going to beat out rank 1 of Sile's Lightcone. Like, it's just, unfortunately, this is just the case. But since it's a free-to-play Lightcone, and it's a free 5-star, and the stats they provide is honestly not bad, and you can use this for so many different units, obviously you're not going to pull like 4 copies of rank 5 Sile's Lightcone, right? So Cruising the Stellar Sea is honestly an excellent choice for you to get until you get better gacha Lightcones for either the hunt path or the destruction path. And just because of how many hunt units can make use of this, that's why I would say get Cruising the Stellar Sea more than not on the 4 of Aeon, right? Okay, I'm getting a little bit long-winded on this, so I just want to go through why you guys should never ever get Texture of Memories. And I'm such a huge hater of this icon because I hate it so freaking much. Let's take a look at the icon, right? Like I mentioned, for Preservation Tree in particular, we have a lot of good choices when it comes to Lightcones for these units. Day 1 of My Life, Landau's Choice, Trend of the Universal Market, they're all excellent Lightcones that you can have. We Are Wildfire honestly is not even that bad because even though they are meant for short fights, but the short fight effects, 5 turns, you can probably use it for some extent. And this is a battle pass Lightcone that I'll explain a little bit later on. And Moment of Victory itself is also just such an amazing Lightcone. Like, yeah, but we won't talk about 5 stars anyways, because the first Lightcone that I recommend you guys to redeem will be Bronya's Lightcone, so we won't really talk about Moment of Victory, right? So why do I hate Texture of Memories so bloody much? This can be explained from the effect. I don't think I'm blocking right. Okay, that is perfect. So the first problem I have with this Lightcone is it increases the wearer's effect rest by 16%. There is no increase of defense, there is no increase of HP, there is no increase of any sort of like tankiness value to the main tank for the main effect. It's effect rest. And this is max level, by the way, 16% effect rest. it's like this 16% is honestly not even a high amount. If you're talking about like 50% or like 60% of not getting effect rest, then maybe it's like you can like compete with other Lightcones, right? But 16% is just way too low for effect rest, and because it doesn't even increase your tank's tankiness, the first line is just rubbish, right? So that's the first line, right? The second line and the third line, if the wearer is attacked and has no shield, they gain a shield equal to 32% of their max HP. Okay, on paper, this looks really, really high. It's basically 1/3 of their max health. And this effect can only trigger once every 2 turns, and if the wearer does have a shield when they attack, the damage they receive is decreased by 24%. Now, what's my problem with this? My problem is the secondary effect and the third effect, they are so conditional, right? You can either have one or the other. You can never have both active at the same time, right? And the biggest issue I have with Texture of Memory is it does nothing to increase your overall team survivability. Now, why is this a problem? If you just take a look at Preservation class in general, right? The main... Okay, well, I don't know why our MC is not here, but okay. Yeah, but the main use of a Preservation unit is not for the Preservation unit to survive the longest, right? I mean, obviously you want them to survive the longest because they're a tank, right? They're meant to survive the longest. But the key point of any Preservation unit is for them to give your team more survivability, right? If you take a look at Japat, take a look at March, right? They both have some kind of abilities that help your team survive, be it in the form of barrier or taunt or shields or this kind of stuff. They all help your team survive and make them last longer than a fight. The issue with Texture of Memory is it does nothing to help your team survive compared to the other Lightcones on the preservation path. So, day 1 of my life increases your entire team's damage rest by 8% and defense for your wearer. And as you know, where a lot of wearers they skill off with the defense, right? Their shield because of defense, and maybe like their taunt and all this kind of stuff. Like all these skills, they're based off of defense or max HP. It helps your tank provide more survival value to the entire team. But Texture of Memories is just such a selfish Lightcone that it makes your tank like a lot tankier compared to like all other Lightcones. But the rest of your team is still paper as like it's still super paper, right? It's not gonna change the fact that if your, like for example, your Asta has like 1000 HP and she gets hit with like a AoE attack, and back then your MC can only provide this like 1000 maybe like 300 value shield, because there's nothing that is increasing the value of your shield to Asta. Whereas if you were to equip any other Lightcone, like Day of My Life, increases your damage rest, increases your defense, which makes your shield even stronger, your Asta might not have died to the AoE. But because you use Texture of Memories, congratulations, your tank didn't die. But so what when the rest of the team is dead, right? And I don't know about you guys, but so far from my entire playthrough of this game, my tank has never ever been the first one to die. Even though they are constantly the one taunting the enemies and drawing aggression and all that kind of stuff, they're just never the first to die because they have such great base stats compared to your other units already, right? That's why I say Texture of Memory is just a rubbish Lightcone, because it's not helping you as a tank serve their main function, which is to protect your team. It protects the tank, right? So what's the point of that? You don't want to protect your tank, you want to protect your team. So yeah, I hope you guys can understand why Texture of Memory is just such a bad Lightcone in general. And with that, we'll move on to the final section, which is the Battle Pass Lightcones. I guess this part is really not really applicable to free-to-plays, because if you're not going to be playing around in the game, you're not going to be getting any of these Lightcones. But I just want to say that you're not really in a loss, because even though the paid Battle Pass gives you this Lightcone, right, none of the Lightcones I would say are game-changing. Like, they're not super OP, they just outclass all the 4-star Lightcones, and they're on par with the 5-star Lightcones. No, all of them, they're honestly just mediocre. They're like side grades rather than upgrades. So it really doesn't hurt that much if you don't have them as a free-to-play units, right? I just want to get that out of the way. So with that being said, let's go through this. The only 2 Lightcones that I'll recommend you guys to get within the Battle Pass is the Harmony one and the Erudition one, right? So let's take a look. For first, the Harmony one. Carve the Moon with the Clouds. At max level 5, right, it gives you this random buff, which is either attack by 20%, crit damage by 24%, or energy regeneration rate by 12%. Now, why is this so good? It's because this is applied to all allies. It's applied to your entire team. Now, although attack and crit damage, right, these 2 stats, they are not that important for units that are not your hyper carry, such as you don't really care if your tank gets attack, or you don't really care if your healer gets crit damage, this kind of stuff, right? But energy regeneration, this one line of energy regeneration is so huge. It's 12% of your energy regeneration, and it happens at a turn. So there's no condition. There is no any conditional effect which restricts you from getting this. It's just every single time it's your turn, it will cycle through these 3 effects. All these effects, even if you don't get energy regeneration rate, attack or crit damage, they're gonna help your hyper carry a lot. And it doesn't even need your support to do anything. if you take a look at your like Bronya, Lightcone, or your Past and Future, right, they still require your Harmony unit to cast a skill. So if you're in the situation where your support has like no more skill points left, then you have to use the basic attack. Then their effectiveness would be greatly reduced, right? But not for Carve the Moon, because as long as it's their turn, the effects will be triggered. And this is for your entire team. That's why I say this Lightcone honestly is just really, really good. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it's an excellent side grade if you're somebody that is lacking like a good support Lightcone. That's why I would say Carve the Moon, very, very good option. Second option. Now, today is another peaceful day. This Lightcone might seem a little bit sus at first. It's like only like 0.2%, not even 2%, 0.2%, right? But if you just do a little quick math, right, it's at max level is 0.4%. So this is essentially a 64% damage increase for a unit with 160 energy. Permanently. There's no requirement. You don't need to use it out, not follow-up attack or anything. It just permanently increases your damage dealt by 64% for a unit with 160 energy. Now some of you might say, oh my god, but Mr. Pokke, 160 energy, that's really, really high. Most of my units don't even have this. Even the highest energy cost for Qing Trade is only 140. I agree. So let's just take this at a more realistic value, at 120. I think 120 is a very fair value. Even at 120, this is still a 48% damage increase. Permanent 48% damage increase for all skills. Basic attack, auto attack, skills, ultimate, follow-up attack, passive, DOT. It applies to everything. Right. This is why I say this Lightcone is really, really good. Because it's just a huge, huge damage multiplier that doesn't even need you to have like a good baseline stats or whatever. It's just based on your max energy. So it's not based on your current energy or it's your max energy. And you're just going to have this at max rank, 48% damage increase for all units. If you have more than 120 energy, this is going to go even higher, right? That's why I say just for the raw value this thing brings, it's an excellent, excellent erudition Lightcone. So yeah, this concludes which two Battle Pass Lightcone you should get. You can really honestly just depend. If you think that you're someone that would need a lot of backup support and you don't really want to get Bronze Lightcone or whatever kind of stuff, and you want to gamble with like the energy regeneration rate, then yeah, you can get Carve the Moon. But if you're somebody that is going to main erudition units, so for example, a very good example, Jingyuan. Sorry, Jingyuan. I just learned the correct pronunciation. He's pronounced Jingyuan, right? So if you're getting Jingyuan, but you're somebody that don't want to pull for his Lightcone, right? This is honestly an excellent, excellent side grade to Jingyuan's Lightcone. I'm going to pull up a screenshot and I'm just going to post it here, which is the damage comparison between this particular Lightcone and Jingyuan's Lightcone. You can see that the difference, right, is honestly not even that much. It is way lesser compared to Silei's damage comparison, which I'm also going to show here, between her signature Lightcone as well as the Herta Shop Lightcone. Alright, so you can just see how strong this Lightcone really is, even for a unit that doesn't even have like 160 energy. Right. So I hope this clears the way of why this Lightcone shouldn't be ignored, and these two Lightcones will be the main choices for you if you want to get something. The rest of the Lightcone, I think generally I can just repeat. I can't really repeat myself that much. It's really about your opportunity cost. And for Preservation Tree, I already mentioned why Preservation Tree you don't really need it, especially for the one over here, because there's just so many good choices for you for preservation. Right? All three gacha Lightcones, they're all fantastic choices. So there's really no need for you to try to run This Is Me for the Battle Pass, just because there's so many substitutes out there. Right, so that's for preservation. For abundance, like I said, all the gacha choices are honestly pretty good. Even perfect time, okay, this shouldn't even be red. This is usable because it increases your effect rest, right? And sometimes you don't want your healer to get frozen. You probably might want to use perfect timing. So all these gacha Lightcones for abundance, they're also perfectly serviceable. So there's really no reason for you to try to get Warm Shortened Cold Night. And let's just take a look at our point 1, right? Sorry, not point 1, point 2. All Lightcones will be compared at max superimposition. And one battle pass is 6 weeks. So the time for you to take to max one battle pass Lightcone is like 6 weeks times 5. Right? That is 30 weeks. That's like half a year. You're telling me within half a year you can't get a single of these? I really don't think that's going to be the case, right? So that's why I say the abundance one, the preservation one, we're done. Return to Darkness. Okay, Return to Darkness I'll explain a little bit just because of how niche this Lightcone is. Increase your crit rate. Right? And crit rate is always a good stat. That's why Cruising the Stellars is such a good Lightcone, because it increases the crit rate. But this effect where it dispels a buff. Now, currently in the game where we have right now, this effect doesn't really mean much, because most of the time when the boss have like this huge charge up ability, it's gonna hit your team for like 1000 damage, and this all these buffs, they all go away as long as you break the enemy boss. Like as long as you break the weakness bar, you don't really need to care about it. So at the current meta, Dispel is not that important. But I can see this having a use if we encounter enemy units where even if you break them, right, the buff is still there. And maybe it's a permanent HP buff or a permanent attack buff that just keeps going on. Then maybe you really want to run some dispel on this, and that's when Hunt might be useful. But because I'm just basing this off of current content, we don't really want to predict for the future, right? We just want to predict, like, know what's the best for our account at the current moment with what we have. And for up to patch 1.3, I don't know what account content there are. The use for this is really not that high, I would say, right? So that is for the Hunt Lightcone. And nowhere to run Destruction Lightcone. Nowhere to run, honestly, is just not that great of a Lightcone because if you take a look at the effects, increases the attack. So the first one is really turning me off. It's attack. It's not damage taken. It's not crit damage. It's not crit. It's just attack. And attack is just we have a billion attack buffs from like all over the place at the current moment. And the second effect is really kind of sus. Like when a wearer defeats an enemy, they restore HP based on their attack. So it's kind of contradicting, you know. Like it's a Destruction Lightcone. I guess you Destruction Lightcones are not meant to be played like Hunt, where you want pure offense, right? You want some sort of sustain. But the secondary effect is just healing you based on 24% of your attack. And it only triggers when you kill something. It doesn't really trigger when you hit them. Like if you tell me every single month they hit somebody and they restore, maybe it will be quite feasible for Clara, especially since she's gonna get hit all the time. So when she does like follow-up attack or something and restores HP, I think this will be pretty good. But because this thing wants you to kill something, right? You have to be the one landing the killing blow that way. You can't be anyone else landing the killing blow. You have to be the one landing the killing blow. So the HP restore honestly is not that important. And of course, most of the time we'll be running healers. So our Destruction Path units don't really face any surviving issues when you consider that they themselves are already rather tanky. Not for Hook. The Hook is basically a Hunt unit. Yeah, but generally Destruction units they're rather tanky, and this health sustain is offside by the healers that we're gonna bring to most comps. Right. So this concludes my overall recommendation. So just to sum everything up, a quick summary for Forgotten Hall. Wolf Out time number 1. If you're maining Hook. If you don't main Hook, you can choose between Quick Pro Quo or Seriousness of Breakfast. Right. Herta Shop. Get Cruising the Stellar Sea just because more units use this icon currently than 4 of Aeon, which is basically only Clara, right? And finally for Battle Pass, you either get Carve the Moon with the Clouds or Today's Another Peaceful Day. Today's Another Peaceful Day is especially important if you're somebody that is not going to pull for Jingyuan's Lightcone, but you still want to play Jingyuan. So get this. If you don't want to get this, then stay to Carve the Moon. I think it's a pretty decent choice as well, right? So yeah, this concludes today's video. How long has it been? Okay, 39 minutes. I don't think it's as long as the previous videos of like 48 minutes. But yeah, I hope this was very concise and you guys can get a lot out of this. And see you guys in the next in-depth analysis video.